Hello, warrior friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Invisible Diaries. We're your hosts. I'm Misty.
And I'm Amber. And today we are discussing grieving the loss of your past self.
As always, a quick disclaimer. Any information discussed in this podcast is strictly our opinion and not for informational purposes only. It is not meant as medical advice and should not be taken that way. Always consult with your doctor or medical team.
We know that battling chronic illness can be hard, and if you find yourself or someone you love in crisis and need someone to talk to, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, which provides free and confidential support in the US 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Again, that number is 1-800-273-TALK. If you prefer to text instead, you can access help by texting the crisis text line at 741-741, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, let's get started.
Yes,
Hi,
I love
friend.
this topic. Thank you so much for choosing this one.
This one, let me tell you why this came up. Because I know we haven't really talked a lot about who we are and kind of our background as far as like our hobbies and stuff. So before my health crisis, my big one. Oh, hi, baby. It's the kitten.
if you're listening and not watching, because we do have this on YouTube, my cat just said hello.
We're very fur baby friendly on this channel. Yeah. So, but basically, this subject popped up because I used to run. I used to be a runner, and I used to do half marathons. Misty and I are located in Florida, so we're both we have easy access to Orlando and Disney and Universal and all of that. And so I would do Disney races. And this in February is their Princess Half Marathon challenge that they do. And I used to do it many years. And so 2 years ago was when I was in the middle of a half marathon and my heart rate got stuck in the 200s and I couldn't get it down. And that was what kind of started the avalanche of getting the dysautonomia diagnosis. So all of the memories are popping up on Facebook. And it's like, I was like, man, I'm super bummed, like super bummed. And it really just kept sitting with me. And I was like, I didn't realize, I don't think, how much that, like I've been grieving that part of who I was. And so I thought, you know what, this would be a good topic because I cannot be the only one. I know you have this issue too. So I thought it would be definitely a good topic to dive into.
Oh yeah, I agree. I know that for me, as far as like grieving myself or my past self, it comes in waves. So like there's sometimes where I'll feel okay. Like lately I've been feeling a little bit better than in comparison to like a year or 2 years ago. I was like scared for my life. And so especially then, the grief was really strong. Now, I feel like I've kind of am getting used to my body and coming to terms with it, which is the acceptance part. I was going to read part of something I wrote about the Kubler-Ross model. And
that is why I love you, and this is why we're friends, is because in my notes I have Kubler-Ross.
Yes.
It's like, this is why Misty
I
and
love
I are
it.
friends, because
yeah, we'll both share. We'll both read our similar versions because we were both on the same page. I love it. But yeah, it comes in waves, and right now, like I still can be somewhat active, and I got a puppy, and I'm more active than I was like a year or two ago, and I hope it stays that way. But I'm gonna have open heart surgery soon, and that's gonna knock me down. Or who knows, I can get hit with a bad flare where I'm having a lot of issues with my nervous system again, and
or you might come back as Superwoman. We don't know.
Yeah, who knows? But at the end of the day, whatever level of grief you're going through, it's still hard, and I feel like you have part of that worry about the unknown, if that makes sense.
I think like when you're acknowledging like the stages of grief, when there's a physical loss of someone, they're not coming back. the hard part with chronic illness is that it changes every day. So it's like, or by month, or by, I mean, like you can have, you know, a period of really great health, like what you're in right now, that like you're feeling good and you're able to
I
do a
wouldn't
lot
say
more
great. A little
of
bit
more
better.
manageable, yeah, more manageable symptoms, you know. And I think, you know, when you go to the doctor and you get your diagnosis and you get a treatment plan together as far as treating your physical body, a lot of times we forget that there's a whole grieving process for, you know, what makes you you, you know. So let's say, you know, like for me, I would grew up dancing and performing, and you know, when and being super physical, I was really athletic. And so 2 years ago, to really have that just completely, like I could not push through it. You know, when I got my first diagnosis of autoimmune disease almost 9 years ago now, I was still able to do enough modifications that it didn't change my life too much. But with the dysautonomia, like when I met that threshold, like all the rules changed. Like I was down and out. So that side of things I think is important to acknowledge, because it's like, okay, I understand physically I won't be able to do certain things, but that's who I was. Like that's part of,
Right.
you know, let's say you know, dreamed of being a nurse, and you know, and we've had this conversation, you've prepared for it, you've taken all these classes, and then now you've got to deviate, like, and that was like your dream. So it's like, now what? Like that's who I
That's me
identified
right
as.
now.
That, yeah, I mean, and I think those are, we have a lot of followers that message us that say, you know, it's like, well, what now? Like what, how do I figure out who I am when I've just lost everything that made me? But no one can see that. With a physical death, it's like, oh my gosh, you lost your spouse, or you lost your parent, or you lost a sibling, like, or a friend. Like you can see that loss. I think it's a lot harder to describe when everything that makes you you is no longer, you know, something you're able to do, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's not something that it goes along with the invisible illness, like the grief that we have to deal with isn't going to be seen typically. And you know, a lot of people don't understand, like even when you're having to say no to plans, people don't always think of it like, oh, you know, that sucks. I know they wish they could be here, but they can't, and that must be hard, you know. Instead, it ends up being like, oh, they're flaking on me, or they're
Oh,
bailing
they
on me
blew
yet
us off
again.
again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, I 100, and I think that that's, you know, when you recognize that you're going to go through the stages of grief, I guess that was my point, like my brain fog, but is that with a physical death, you go through those stages and it may come in waves. But with a chronic illness or an autoimmune disease, like understanding that you may go through those all 5 or 7 stages every other 24 hours. I mean, you might have, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not always just like you've moved on to the next stage and now you accept it, that this is now your life and it's great. Because I have days where I'm like, this is BS and I'm mad at everyone. You know what I mean? And we've talked about that. Like, we're all about opening space up for negative, you know, there's room for the negative too. We had another appearance of the cat.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's good. I like cat therapy.
Oh, there's like, I'm like, there's cheese on my table. Okay,
That's
so
funny.
I was gonna read a little bit of what I wrote, just so if people aren't familiar with the Kubler-Ross model. The Kubler-Ross model of the 5 stages of grief was pioneered by a Swiss American woman named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Her book on death and dying elaborates more on this theory and her studies. Her model of the 5 stages were my inspiration behind writing what I'm reading right now.
Love it.
But I put a twist on my own touch of the stages in the perspective of living with a chronic illness. For chronic illnesses, this model is not linear. It is a circle that loops back around over and over. Identifying these feelings helps to not feel alone and to make sense of what we're feeling, that it is actually normal. If you don't have a chronic illness, maybe you want to understand what goes on in the mind of someone who does, and thank you for that. So I'll just, instead of reading the entire thing, I'll just kind of go over like the stages. You have shock and denial, and you have anger, bargaining, depression and anxiety, which is, I think, the one that I had added, acceptance, yeah, And then basically like how I had ended it was, to keep a journal, see a therapist regularly, join support groups. This is a tough ride, but you're not alone. It's important to manage your mental health as well as your physical health, which is so important. Um,
Absolutely.
and with all of those stages I mentioned, like we were saying, it's not linear. You're going to be all over the place. And it could
Yeah.
happen in a day, it could happen over a week. It could happen, I mean, you could be angry 1 minute and feel acceptance another, and then, 2 months from now, be bargaining. It really truly is like an ongoing thing.
Absolutely. Well, and that's, I mean, I didn't realize, I think we do such a good job of just getting through the day. Like, I had gone over with some other running friends to the running expo because I was like, oh, I'm not running. I'd love to go just see what's going on. And so we went over to Disney last Thursday, and I did not realize like what a traumatic like onset that would follow of just,
Oh,
I was so angry and I was so happy. It was really confusing to be in a place that like brought me so much joy and to see so many people that were running and, accomplishing their goals and, cheering and talking to those people, but also feeling really, really, really mad that I'm not in a place where I can do that right now. And so I came home and I was, trying to process and digest it. And I was writing in my journal and I kind of wrote down 5 things for me when I was breaking it down to be like, okay, like I don't want to stay in this negative space because that's just not where I flourish. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I know if I let myself sit there for too long, that it is a downward spiral very quickly for me. So I wrote 5 things down just that came to mind to kind of get me out of that funk. And the first one was to let go of old understanding of things. So letting go of the dialogue of I used to be able to, and kind of shifting to what am I able to do now, or now I'm able to. And so, I might not be able to sign up for a half marathon and run that like it's no big deal, but can I take the dog for a walk? Today I can. Tomorrow I might not be able to, but today I can take the dog for a walk. And that's moving my body. That's, and whatever that looks like, because that'll be different for everybody. But the second one was to revisit old goals and then create new ones with where you're at in mind. So, what other things was I interested in besides sports, dancing, running? So, I had to kind of go back to, what other creative things do I like to do that fulfills that side of things without, you know, putting a demand on my body when I'm not able to do it. Third was breaking down those goals into smaller, more manageable pieces. So whereas I might be able to, do a full 30-minute run before, like I said, now I might not be able to do that, but I am able to take the dog for a walk. So I want to walk, a mile. I can break that down to smaller goals. Like if I'm walking for 20 minutes every day, then maybe on a good health day, I can actually, I've built up some stamina. That changes all the time. So being flexible is really important. But 4 was evolving my support network. So not spending as much time in my running groups and spending more time in my chronic illness groups, helps shift my perspective, that there are other people that are in the same boat. Might not be the same place in our journey, but they definitely know how I feel, reaching out to friends like Misty when it's like having a really tough day, I'm angry, help me work through it. And then 5, is learning the new normal and that changes all of the time. So those 5 things, just kind of when I really broke them down, I was able to come up with some other things I like to do. And I actually explored some things that I haven't thought about since I was a kid. So, I'm not giving up on running. I'm not, but I'm not focusing on that I can't run a half marathon right now.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. I think like the word that I love that kind of like sums up what you're saying is like adapting.
Yeah.
So adapting and modifying, not only like your way of thinking, but also, finding something new, like finding a new passion that is more suitable for what, you're capable of right now. A lot of times we'll kind of be so focused on the past and, what was, and that we don't move on into something that could really be a great opportunity or something that could really be fulfilling or make us happy. So sometimes just trying to like reinvent yourself and
I
find a
love
new
that.
passion is is like a good idea for a goal.
And it's a great time to explore things, when you really sit down and you're like, what do I enjoy doing? That if the possibilities were limitless, and you're able to just write down, you can start crossing off things that, maybe when you start to really look at it, you're like, okay, might not be able to do that right now. Maybe that's a great goal for one day, but this is a great time. I've always wanted to learn to play the guitar. I can do that when I'm in the bed. You know what I mean? Like when I'm
Yeah.
having a day that maybe I can't physically move around as much, but I can still move my arms and I can still, do something, learning a foreign language or, working on writing a book. I mean, it, people are so diverse in what they, what makes them who they are. I think that sometimes we forget that we are allowed to reinvent ourselves at any point, whether you're a healthy, able-bodied person, or in an unhealthy place. So it's like you can
Yeah.
change at any point as far as like, your outlook. You may not be able to change your circumstances, but
And it's always going to take time and hard work too. So like when you were a runner back in the day, when you first started doing that, it was hard, I'm sure, and it took a lot of work, a lot of practice to get there. So it's going to be the same thing, and I think sometimes that's where people can get discouraged because it's like, well, running is something that you knew how to do and you did it well. And so when you try to start something new, you don't have that same feeling right now because you want that that instant gratification. But you just have to remember that it took you a while to get to that place too. So say you want to pick up painting, well, your first paintings might look terrible like a third grader's, but if you
right.
continue and you have passion and you practice and really work towards it, you could be really good at it.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily about the outcome. It's about what the sense of feeling and empowerment that it gives you. You may not ever be somebody that's going to sell their artwork, but if creating art is what makes you happy, you should by all means do that. So it's, and I think that mind shift from that shift in my thinking also is that it's not just breaking it down into manageable goals, but also not comparing myself to other people, because I think that no one is immune to that comparison game, especially because obviously even in the chronic illness community, you're still, looking and seeing like, oh wow, like I know that person has the same autoimmune disease that I do, but man, they're out, hiking, or they're out, going on a bike ride. Like I wish I could do that. I think that it's important to remember that everybody is different. I mean, and
Hmm.
that changes constantly. So I have to really, if I start to feel that coming up, then I take a break from social media, because I start to get in that like, well, they're sick, but they're doing something. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, but for every single person, healthy or not, it's the highlight reel.
for sure.
Like
Oh, for sure.
you might see these great things, and I'll do it too. Like I think even just yesterday I was gonna post a selfie from like the week before because I was like, oh, I look cute there, and this week I've been crying and a mess and stressed, and I don't look cute right now. And so, like I didn't end up posting anything, but sometimes what you see isn't always reality. You have to remember that as well.
Absolutely. And like you say, they might be posting a picture from a trip 2 weeks ago and they were feeling better, and they may be home in bed posting that picture. So
Exactly.
just remembering not to compare where you're at and where you're going with someone else. It's just everybody's on their own journey, which is why there's no guidebook, there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's just making sure you're checking in with yourself and you're doing things that light you up, because like Misty said, with modifications, you still have to find things that bring you joy on a daily basis, because
Hmm.
you have to recreate that identity, with where you're at
Yes.
now. So
So let's talk about some of the stages of grief that we like to we don't not necessarily like, but that we find ourselves in a lot. So I'll start. I feel like I am in denial or bargaining a lot. So like the denial stage is an example of that for me is there's a lot of times, in fact, even just like I think 2 months ago, I went and got more blood work from a rheumatologist, and everything was great. It was good. My blood work was good, which is awesome. But
Hmm.
I think a lot of times I get in denial and then I'm like demanding more blood work or more tests of something because I don't want to believe that there's no cure for what I have. I have
Right.
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I'm in chronic pain every day. Like a lot of times I'm in such denial that I'm like, surely there's got to be something that,
Right.
you know, that's red flagged and that I could just take some supplements or something that's going to make this better. And
Absolutely.
so I am in that one often. I have such a hard time accepting that. So
Right.
I don't think I really go through the acceptance period too often. I think I like to stay in the denial. So even when I saw the rheumatologist and we went over everything, he's like, unfortunately, there's not anything we can do for EDS. Um, and he kind of was just like, you don't really even need to see me. Just see
Oh,
your primary doctor. He's like, because there's not really anything we can do. And he's like, so I'll just go ahead and send you back over there and I'll make notes in your chart. And honestly, it's not the first time I've heard this. I've heard this a lot. So I shouldn't be shocked.
right.
I should accept it. But at the same time, um, that's an example of denial for me. And then the other stage is the bargaining stage. So for me, the bargaining is like, okay, well, what if I do yoga and I'll get like big into yoga and I would do yoga like every Sunday for like a few months, or oh, I'll start doing like these smoothies every morning. I'll eat super super clean, or let me just try this new supplement. And to me, that's my version of bargaining is like, let me do these things and hopefully, something will come of that. Or,
Yeah.
if only I did this a little bit better. And that's kind of when you give yourself like the shame and the guilt and the blame, where it's like, maybe if I did this better. But then when I try those things so adamantly, um, and they don't work, then then it's like I kind of go back and forth between the two. And one
Right.
last thing, um, I think what makes it really hard is that, and no offense to anyone, but there's a lot of companies out there that, or people who sell brands that will approach people like us because they know we're vulnerable and we're like desperate for something and they'll reach out to us. And well, everybody has their opinion of a cure. Like, why don't you exercise more? Why don't you try this new, protein shake that I sell, or this, you know, product line that I use? And everyone has these answers. And, um, like we've all tried them all. And unfortunately, it's not that easy. And I think that's where, like, for me personally, I live a lot in the denial and the bargaining stage. How about you?
Yeah, I definitely probably live less in the denial side of things. I think I've moved from that, now that there's been a bigger physical manifestation for me. Like I can actually see when I'm in tachycardia and I can see when, things are swelling, joints are swelling. But I definitely teeter back and forth a lot with anger and bargaining. Those tend to be where I find myself bouncing back and forth more often, um, because I'll bargain, and then when it doesn't turn out the way I feel like I should have control over it, then I get angry. So it's
Yeah.
like, it's a false sense of control because really nobody has control over a lot. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do our best and you can prepare, but you ultimately don't have control over every single outcome. So I think, for me, it's when I've created a new ritual for myself when I'm in that place, like I did the other day, where I was like, okay, I can stay angry and I can stay in this place of focus on what I can't do anymore, or I can come up with solutions for where I'm at now. And that may change 2 days from now. I might have to sit down and revisit it again. But staying in a place of anger doesn't serve me or the people I love, in any way that is helpful. So I allow myself to be angry, but then I just don't stay there. And I think with bargaining, I'm like you, Misty. Something else will pop up on my feed, and I'm like, oh, like, I haven't tried that yet. Maybe I'll try that, and then I, go 110% out the gate, and I fizzle out because, let's be real, spoons are legit, and
Yeah.
you usually are starting in a deficit anyway. But, you know, I think that we all know at the end of the day when we're doing our best, because you're the only one that's inside of you. So that internal dialogue of, yeah, I've done my best today and that's good enough, and whether you're in that place or you're in a different place, either place is okay. And I guess that's really my big thing on those, wherever you're at in the grief stages, wherever you're at with bouncing back and forth, because you might not always go through all 5 or all 7, depending on what model you're looking at. Like, you might have days where you teeter back and forth between 1 or 2, and it's all okay. You're not by yourself in that feeling. You just might not be in the same place always,
Right. And, another one of the stages too is depression, which, a lot of people can stay there for a long time. So at the end of the day, it's really important to get help.
Right.
If you feel like you're having a hard time navigating, or you're stuck in one of those stages, or things are just too hard, that's why we always give out the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-TALK. But, trying to see a therapist, or even joining like some support groups, making friends with your fellow spoonies. It's always good to kind of talk about it so you don't feel alone. I know a lot of people in the community don't have like friends and family that support them or
Right.
understand. That's often the case, but if that is the case for you, then that's why, we're here. Like, reach out to us. You'll see, if you go to our Instagram, it's at the Invisible Diaries. You'll see, like, there's so many people that will comment that are in the same boat. I mean, this is what we're trying to create, is like a community and like a support group. So, comment back on, respond to some of those people and check out their pages and what they have going on, and make friends. I mean, I know they're internet friends,
Absolutely.
but sometimes these are the people that really understand us the most, and they get it. And sometimes that's all you need, even, especially if your family can't offer that to you.
100%. I mean, having a good support network, even if it is an internet stranger, in a safe capacity, you guys always have to be careful with using the internet. But, I think that's part of that recreating, who you want to be. You get to decide who's in your, I know some people have come down on using the word tribe, so network, community, your group of people, the people that, make you feel some sort of way, that evokes, you wanting to always move forward instead of staying stuck. But also, Misty and I are very transparent when it comes to holding space for people that aren't always in the same place. So you can, and by holding space, because we write that a lot in our descriptions under our Instagram sometimes, all that means is that you have a safe space at our table wherever you're at in your journey. You don't have to be up and positive all the time. You don't have, if you're in a really weird place and you need to reach out, that all of that's okay. We just want you to know that it's okay wherever you're at.
Absolutely.
So
And we also want to thank you for taking the time to listen. And we ask that you guys give us a 5-star review, so that way other spoonies can find our podcast. That's if you have iTunes. That just makes it so that we can be a little bit more visible. You can visit us on the web at theinvisibleidiaries.com, or find us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at The Invisible Diaries. We also have a Facebook support group. It's kind of small right now, so we're really kind of relying on everybody to invite their friends, and it's just basically a place where you can post, questions,
privately.
concerns. Yeah. And of course, feel free to message us with any requests for upcoming podcast topics, and we're always here for our community, shedding light on invisible illnesses.
Yes, we appreciate every single one of you guys that downloads our podcast, that hits a like, or interacts with us on any of our social media platforms. We just want you to know that we see you and that you're not alone, and we appreciate every single one of you.
Yes. Well, thank you all for listening.
Yes,
and
we'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.